Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Dev Influencer Show. Now, a few episodes ago, like 4 or 5 episodes ago, I talked about how I was going to go through kind of the skills, relationships, reputation stuff that we were talking about, right? And so, yeah, I just want to dive back into that. I'm going to probably do relationships this time, reputation next time, and we can just kind of work through this stuff. But let's dive in. Let's talk about relationships here real quick. So it's interesting, right? Just how all this stuff goes together as far as getting what you want, right? And the last 2 episodes, I talked about getting more freelance clients, which seems to be kind of a theme over the last few strategic calls that I've done. It's like, hey, I do this freelancing and I want to get more clients. And it's like, well, okay, let's put together some stuff that gets you in front of the right people, right? And then once you're in front of the right people, invite them on the show, make sure you're covering what they care about, make sure that you're nailing the content, and have them refer you to other people so that you can get them on the show. And from there, you've built a relationship where you can actually sell to them, right? But the other thing is that podcasts are a terrific relationship tool in a lot of other ways. You can, not just your guests, right? But if you have a co-host, it's a terrific way to build a relationship that way. One of the people I talked to recently had actually talked to somebody about having a co-host and was basically waiting on her to get back to him. If you can't get somebody to move rather quickly on something, my experience has been that you're going to spend the rest of your relationship with them on the podcast pushing to get the things to happen. Because they're busy, they're not making it a priority, and so it's just going to be hard to make that happen. So if that's an issue for you, then give up, move on, have them on as a guest as often as you want, right? But let's talk about some of the other things that I've worked with as far as relationships go. One of the things that I've done is I've had people get on my email list, right? And so I put a little pop-up on the website. It's like, hey, get this thing, blah, blah, blah. And when they enter their email address, they get that, and then they get on the email list. And then usually I have some kind of warm-up sequence, and at least 2 of them are, hey, email me, right? Hey, let me know where you're at with this, right? What are your thoughts on this? And then I can email back and forth with them, and I can start building a relationship that way. Okay, where are you at? What are you struggling with? What can I help with? What can I do for you, right? And then we incorporate some of that into the podcast, right? And then we've got this relationship where it was like, hey, I asked Chuck to talk about that, and he put it on JavaScript Jabber. Whoa, right? I've incorporated feedback that I've gotten from people into talks that I've given at conferences. I've incorporated stuff into other things, webinars and what have you, right? And all of that just kind of builds into having that relationship because people feel like they're important. People feel like they matter. And the reality is that this is probably the most important part of podcasting, and the most important part of building a business is having relationships, right? I talked about 2 episodes ago when I was talking about the call that I had with Luca and getting into that local community, was that he was saying, well, how do I get people to look at my portfolio? And the reality was that the most effective way for him to get customers was to get referrals, right? To be the guy. Everybody wants to be the, hey, I know a guy, right? And if you're the, hey, I know a guy, what that turns into is I have this problem. Oh, hey, I know a guy. And he's terrific, right? He solved this problem for me, and he can solve it for you, right? Hey, I've got this great lady over here that she's terrific, right? She makes all these things go away. I don't even have to think about all this stuff. Just to give you an example, a few years ago when I was writing the book, I realized that, and it was basically when I sat down to record the audiobook, I realized that it wasn't fluent enough for me to record as an audiobook, right? And so I had an accountability partner at the time who I had been talking to, and I was like, dude, I think I need an editor for my book, right? And he goes, oh, well, I have somebody, right? And he referred me to her, right? Somebody that she had done a terrific job for him. She was helping him get his book written. I had already written the first draft. And so I handed it off to her. She sent it back to me with a whole bunch of edits. I'm working through those now, and we're getting it done, right? And that's part of the deal, right? Is that all of a sudden, I didn't go check her work. I just took his word for it, really. And that's how you get that work in. So if you're trying to freelance, having relationships that will send you referrals is huge, right? When I was getting into freelance, Eric Davis was working in what was it called? It was this project management tool, Redmine. And he was basically getting a ton of work because he had contributed like a gazillion plugins and a whole bunch of source code to it, right? And so he was the Redmine guy. I mean, he had really plumbed that vein, right? And he was getting so much work that he was handing it off to me and a couple of other friends, right? It was all written in Ruby on Rails. And so we would get the work and we would do the work, right? And so he just referred that over, and it was a relationship that worked out really well. And he looked like he was awesome because it was like, well, I'm too busy, but I've got all these other people, right? And so we were his I know a guy, right? And it wasn't I know a guy who can do a thing I can't. It was I know a guy who can do it because I don't have time, right? And so you can build those kinds of relationships. If there's a specific community that you want to get into or a specific industry you want to get into, if you can be the I know a guy for the people who lead the community, then you're golden, right? Because every time they come up and they say, hey, I need a developer to build a mobile app, they go, oh, you got to talk to so-and-so, right? In the podcast space, I'll give you another example. There's a guy named Gordon Firemark, and he showed up to all the podcasting conferences. And boy, if you had a legal question, it was funny because for years, you just sit down and go, so Gordon, what about this? And he just answer you, right? He just answer you. Sometimes you'd have to pay him to get like a template or a contract or something put together. But I mean, he just tell you. He just tell you the answer. Oh, well, here's where it gets murky legally, right? And he was terrific. But the flip side was that he built all these relationships. So now, in all of the Facebook groups about podcasting, all the podcasts about podcasting, all of these other places where people go to get help about podcasting, they send in a legal question and everybody goes, I don't know, ask Gordon, right? And so it's those kind of relationships. It's that kind of payoff that you get. But he just showed up and he was happy to help all of us. And that's how you do that, right? So I have people that feel like they owe me because they were on the podcast and it made a difference for them in their career, or did one of the conferences, right? One of the online conferences that I put on, right? And felt like that kicked off their career. I've had people that got back to me and just said, hey, look, I listened to the podcast for a couple of years and it opened the door for me to get a new job. I mean, all of this stuff pays off. All of this stuff makes a ton of sense if you really just get in there and do the work, right? And sometimes some of these relationships are relationships like the people who got jobs with people that I've never met, but they feel like they have a relationship with me. And so when the time comes where I need something, I need help, I need feedback, I need anything, they're more than happy to help out, right? And so it pays off, right? I kind of get credit for that. And even if I don't, I mean, I still get I can't describe to you the feeling I get every time I hear from somebody that says, hey, look, my life was awful, right? I was depressed at work. My relationships weren't going well, whatever, right? And then I found tech and I decided to get into tech, and your podcast helped me get this new job. And all of a sudden I was making more money. We moved to a different place. My wife quit working, or my husband was able to then switch his career, or, whatever. And you get all of these possibilities just opening up, right? And they talk about how it changed their lives, right? Now, they did all the work, right? I mean, I'm this tiny thing, I just gave them a little nudge with free content, right? But I can't tell you how that feels. And all of these different kinds of relationships are relationships that are going to pay off for you as you're building this, as you're building your content. And so relationships really matter. So as you're going out and you're doing the work to become an influencer, don't discount the fact that you have to show up. You have to show up when you make your content. You got to show up at the users groups. You got to show up at the conferences. You got to show up and talk to people. You got to show up and find out what they care about. Show up and build the relationships with the people who can give you the feedback so that you can put the stuff out there so that you can nail it and help people. And then go help people and really build the one-on-one relationships, because the one-on-one relationships are going to form a lot of the information that you need for everything else. And then you're going to be amazed at the way that these relationships pay off that you never intended them to, right? I mean, I don't go build relationships thinking, oh, gee, this is eventually going to, I don't do that, right? But as I help people out, what I found is that eventually it comes back. Eventually it pays off. Eventually I get back what I'm looking for. And I didn't even know I was looking for it. So go build the relationships. And if you're looking for how to do that with the podcast, I mean, obviously we cover this in the Dev Influencers Accelerator. We talk about how to use some of the relationships that you have to grow your audience. We talk about how to build relationships with your hosts and with your guests and with all the other people that are involved. We talk about all of this stuff as part of the accelerator. But, in order to get it, in order to jump in and figure out how to build the relationships within your community or within your target market, you first got to get on that strategic call. We got to figure out where you're at, where you're trying to get to, and how best to do that. And so if you want to do that, go to devinfluencers.com/apply. Enter your email address. It'll take you to the application. Fill in the form. Let us know that you're interested, and I'll get back to you. I'll send you an email, and we'll set up that 1 hour strategic call. And we'll figure out where you're at, where you're trying to get to, and how we can get you there. All right? All right, folks. Well, we're going to wrap this one up. Until next time, Max out.